Ladies and gentlemen, what you just took a very good look at was what the Hebrew, or if you prefer, the Igbo people, or if you still prefer, the Igbo people, call Ofe Onugbu. Ofe Onugbu. Onugbu is the bitterest herb you can think of that exists in this world. A herb that is so bitter that if you put one leaf into your mouth, the taste of bitterness remains in your mouth for a very long time. But Igbo people found a way to prepare this very bitter herb. 1/3 of the bitterness remains, and the Igbos enjoy it. And interestingly, this nation enjoys this extremely bitter food. I began to think about the relationship between the Igbos and the Onugbu about 20 years ago, when I was a lawyer and a law teacher in Nigeria. I had a very good friend called Patrick Ugwani, who, as at then, he had a master's degree in religious studies. So he brought a lot of freshness into study of culture. During one of our discussions, Patrick said, Remy, worthy of exploration is, why would a particular group of people, why would a people love food that is bitter? I jerked upright, curious. He said the Igbos eat not just onugbu, but they also eat otaze, an equally bitter herb. The question was, why should a people enjoy food that is bitter? Ladies and gentlemen, I have knocked about in the world. I have read. Well, into what we would call the middle of my high school education. I knew virtually the capital of every country in the world. I'm an informed person. I don't expect to find people that would love bitter foods. But here we are discussing a people that go all out of their way to eat food that is bitter and to enjoy such foods. In my part of Igbo land, Nigeria decided to call it Anambra. What I just showed you is the favorite food. If I tell you the efforts I made, the expenses I incurred to find onugbu in America, and it took me 6 hours to prepare what you are looking at, because only the dried one is available here, and the processing is not so good, so you have to sift and sift and sift to make sure that you remove every sand. Patrick and I arrived at the conclusion that for a people to go all out of their way to look for food that is bitter, and not only eat it, but to love it, they received a command from a higher authority. As I progressed in my report, and my research rather, things continue to fall into place. Igbos love onugbu or taze because they received a command from Chukwu to eat bitter herbs. We are only beginning to write down what we are seeing vis-a-vis the Igbos and Israel, vis-a-vis the Igbos and the biblical Israelites. You are going to find some of what I just enumerated in this study and in this as well. And for African Americans and Caribbeans that are following up, this ties you into the story. The Israelites were supposed to eat bitter herbs on the night of the Passover, crossing over from Egypt to the land of Israel. God said that they should eat bitter herbs to always remind them of their experiences in Egypt, so that they would not make themselves amenable, susceptible to be enslaved again. Igbos preserved this tradition handed down to them by God by eating onugbu and otaze every week. 2 times a week. If my son had not gone to school, both of us will be preparing to wolf down this. And remember on one occasion, after Chukwu had spoken to us through the father of the prophets, Moses himself, our ancestors said, all that the Lord has said we will do. And God said, would that my children will always be like this, that they would not even want to know the reasons why they have to obey me, that they will be contented with just obeying me. Igbos began to eat, or continue to eat, otaze and onugbu, as their ancient Israelite ancestors did. And only recently, we are beginning to realize that these 2 herbs are medicinal. We just obeyed. And my advice to Igbos is, we were colonized, we were Christianized, we lost a lot, but we can still recover everything that has been lost and do them. In them, there is life. Just as I began this research with Patrick Ugwanye, I made a post this morning on my timeline that I'm going to make this post. And a gentleman came in with what I consider very good extrapolation. Even though I have written 20 books on this subject, I welcome the contributions of Blake Wynne, because every good research is conducted when you bring and I bring. When he mentioned that we are supposed to remember, or that we are commanded to remember the Passover every day, because it is in the Shema prayers, I welcomed it and gave him commendation. But when I also brought in some verity, some truth, that Omenana, what I essentially said was that Omenana produced Judaism. He didn't take kindly to that, because we are structured to always assume that the people constructed as blacks and Africans don't have anything to contribute. But that is a misconstruction. Omenala simply means religion and culture you shall do in the land. Go to Deuteronomy 6:1. After God, speaking through the father of the prophets Moshe, had instructed our ancestors about the do's and don'ts of Israel, God said, these are the things you shall do in the land. And the cognomen, the moniker for the Israelite religion, for the Igbo religion, is simply things you shall do in the land. He didn't want to learn this because it is coming from somebody who belongs to a group that we have all been constructed to view as people who have very little to contribute. Well, I've done my best to put his feet on the ground. Israel will be redeemed when we all get down from our high horses and begin to listen to one another. And on this note, I yield. But before calling it quits, subscribe, share, get your friends to do the same. Have a beautiful 2023. Thank you.